I'm under strict instructions from Jeremy. Three things really. One's no jokes.
You don't want this recorded?
Two, watch my language. And three, no throwing about any small red books. I just want to say thanks first of all. I want to talk about three things: the immediate future, then what happens when we go back into opposition, and then the preparations for the next Labour government. So I just want to talk about those three things. But initially, I just want to say thanks. Really. I want to say thanks to the Hazards Network, to FACT, to all the asbestos campaigners, all the others, all of you. To be frank, for keeping the flame alight in some of the most difficult circumstances and in a really difficult climate over the last 6 years. So I just want to say thanks to you, because I don't think in our movement, in fact, what you've been able to do in the most difficult climate is to outline and expose what's been happening in terms of the austerity cuts, what's been happening in terms of deregulation, the onslaught of the red tape challenge, if you remember that one, and all that you've done in terms of just exposing what's been going on in terms of the number of deaths, the injuries and the ill health, and above all, I think the decline of the overall health and safety climate, the inspections, the regulations and the investment. So just thanks for that. Let me just go through those three things then, just for the immediate future. In the next 2.5 months, we've got the Labour Party leadership election. And I don't want to dwell on it too much, it's not for this meeting, but it's not something we've sought, and to be frank, it's a complete distraction from what we should be doing in terms of opposing the Tories. I'd rather be fighting the Tories, quite honestly, than fighting some of the plotters within my own party. It is a very British coup, and to be honest, it's got nothing to do with Jeremy Corbyn at all. No. What this is about is you. What this is about is a large number of you dared to elect a socialist as the leader of the Labour Party, and this is the establishment telling you to get back in your place. And not to raise issues like health and safety, not to expose what's been going on over generations, to be frank, in terms of the loss of life and the ill health and the sickness at work for working people. But what we've been able to do in this campaign is now, I think, turn it to our advantage. Even though we didn't want a leadership election, even though we didn't want to be involved in this distraction, well, to be frank, we're now using it to outline the policies that we now need to address some of the most critical issues facing our community. And it's working. We've started a campaign last week, and we're doing meetings all around the country, and literally those meetings have been packed out. On Thursday night I was in Oxford for an economics debate that we set up. 500 people turned up. I've just come back from Plymouth, Exeter, Liskeard. All of them, no less than 500 people turning up. 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon in a village called Liskeard, 500 people. What's interesting is that the type of the meetings that we're doing, of course, as speakers, etc., but actually they're more about discussion and the sharing of people's experience of what they're facing in their communities, in their lives, and then people themselves forming the programme of the solutions, the policies that we should implement. And it's just so dynamic and creative, to be frank, it's exciting. And what's amazing, if you look at some of the pictures of who's at those meetings, it is actually all generations. Huge numbers of young people are turning up to these discussions. Huge numbers of people of all ages coming along, some of them never engaged in political or trade union activity before, excited at the prospect that actually we can have a new type of politics. And it is a new type of politics. It isn't the politics of spin or triangulation or public relations that we've seen in the past. That's what Owen Smith and others are trying to pull us back to. What this is, the politics of a mass movement on the march. Yeah. We now have 600,000 members in the Labour Party, the biggest political party in the whole world. so what we're trying to do is ensure that this leadership election is turned to our advantage in terms of the policy debate, and yes, the preparation, almost like a dry run for the general election. And it is about policies, not personality. They're trying to draw it into a denigration of Jeremy Corbyn and to be on the media, the whole of the establishment, the whole of the media are against us, trying to do that. But actually people have cut through that. They don't believe what they read anymore, and they certainly don't believe what they see on the BBC anymore. And they're cutting through that now and they're actually discussing the real issues rather than the personality. And it's interesting, meeting after meeting, people are raising the details of health and safety issues. The asbestos in schools issue has been raised this weekend with me. Compromise agreements have been raised with me as well, gagging clauses within those compromise agreements to prevent whistleblowers actually blowing the whistle on what's been happening in terms of health and safety at work within their particular industries or their particular sections. So what we'll be doing in the coming weeks is we'll be rolling out our policy programme in some detail. And let me just say to you, there will be an element of a health and safety manifesto, and I just tell you now, it will reflect the demands that you've just agreed. Move on to the second stage. I'm hoping, I'm not complacent in any way because I know what we're up against. I'm not complacent in any way. But I'm hoping that Jeremy Corbyn gets re-elected with an increased mandate. But I'm not complacent. We're up against the whole of the establishment coming at us. And we're up against, as you saw in the court case, some immensely rich multi-millionaires coming at us legally, funding Save the Labour Party rather secretly, a whole range of other organisations trying to set us up in this campaign. This is a huge amounts of money been invested trying to bring us down. So I'm not complacent in any way, and our organisation on the basis of a mass movement is about getting people out to support us, involved in our campaign, and then eventually vote. If Jeremy is re-elected, and I think he will win, we keep using this phrase in every conversation now, if Jeremy wins. Now we've abbreviated it IJW. So all of ours is the IJW, and we go back into opposition. To be frank, let me just outline what we'll be doing. First of all, we'll be working with you to oppose the austerity measures which have brought about the cuts in the HSE. What we'll be doing is trying to expose the lack of performance by the HSE as a result of those cuts. We'll be trying to analyse the lack of investment and deregulation, and we'll be working with you every parliamentary mechanism we possibly can to expose that, and also every public mechanism we can. This is about HSE cuts, but can I also say, I'm scandalised at the commercialisation of the HSE now. The fact that it's now tasked with selling its services as products, not just in this country, but around the world. And you know as well as I do, as soon as the profit motive enters into any organisation, actually the principles usually start going out the window. And I think that those conflicts of interest between having to make a profit as against doing your job objectively and independently always take place in that sort of climate. So we'll be doing that. But let me say also, with regard to Brexit, we've already outlined our red lines about the negotiations that need to take place for now establishing the new Europe that we want. And one of those red lines is no watering down of the regulatory environment. That's a basic red line that we put. And the one thing that I think Jeremy has in terms of these negotiations, the advantages he has, is that over the last 10 months we've established extremely good relations with the leaders of the Socialist and Social Democratic parties right the way across Europe. And we're forming a coalition with them about how we create another Europe. We campaigned in the European referendum on Remain but Reform, and we campaigned on the platform of another Europe is possible. We're now going to work with our Socialist and Social Democratic Party, other parties across Europe, and with other progressive movements like Syriza and Podemos to create that another Europe that we think is possible. And it will mean that we will not allow the undermining of workers' rights or the regulatory environment in the new Europe that we create. And that does mean as well, to be frank, there'll be no more TTIPs. And yes, we'll refuse to sign up to CETA, But in addition to that, we're working with other organisations to demonstrate what would be the criteria and the agenda for proper trade agreements. And inserted into that agenda will be an appropriate regulatory regime, both in terms of the way workers are treated and actually health and safety as well. Can I just make this offer to you as well? We'll work closely, as we always have done, because we set most of them up, Jeremy and myself, with all the individual trade union groups in Parliament to make sure there's a trade union voice effectively in all of these discussions, both in terms of the future of government policy, but also opposing the Tories and also the regulatory regimes after Brexit. But can I say also, we've always worked closely with yourselves in terms of the Hazards Network and others as well. It's an open door policy. And I just make this offer as well. If you want to put together a paper on the issues that you're facing, the demands that you've set out, we'll take it direct to the Shadow Cabinet and make sure that's debated and discussed and then identified as policy priorities for the future. With regard to my own Treasury team, what we've done also is a whole range of, as some of you have attended, economics seminars and lectures all around the country. And to be frank, they've been packed out. We've organised an annual State of the Economy conference each year now. The last one, 800 people, and we could have filled it 3 times over. What we'll do, and I just give you this commitment, in terms of the Treasury team, we'll insert into that series of lectures and seminars and into our next State of the Economy conference the whole issue of health and safety as an economic issue. The issues that, in terms of if you undermine the regulatory regime, actually it does have an impact on the economy overall and does have an impact in terms of the performance of the economy based upon the exploitation of workers, which in the long term will undermine not just the reputation of the British economy and British companies and the performance of the British economy overall, but actually it will undermine its economic performance as well. So in terms of opposition, we will work with you to oppose what the Tories are doing. We'll work with you to ensure that we expose what's happening, and at the same time we'll make sure that we're working with you to raise a whole level of debate around health and safety in this country. In the longer term, and I hope it's not longer term because I'm up for a general election for whenever it comes and I think we can win it, but when we go into government, let me just talk about what we intend to do. I think we have to accept the whole basis of health and safety protections in this country is on the basis of the development of the trade union movement, and health and safety improvements have come as a result of the historic development of trade unions in this country. So it's about organisation, representation and pressure. The health and safety advances have gone hand in hand with trade union advance as well. So therefore we can't establish an effective health and safety regime unless we restore trade union rights in this country. For the last 10 months as an administration, what we've been trying to do is to work with others, the trade union movement overall, and also with other organisations to make sure that we have a clear programme of reform when we go back into government. That's why we launched under Ian Lavery, again ex-NUM, active trade unions, many people will know over the years. That's why we launched the Workplace 2020 consultation. And out of that now are coming a programme of clear policies that we can implement when we go into government that will restore trade union rights in this country, address the anti-trade union laws that have taken place, and yes, scrap the Trade Union Act that has just been enacted by this government. Now, a month ago, I was at the launch of the Institute of Employment's Manifesto for Labour Law. This is a red book, I will throw it down. And let me just say this. We've endorsed it as a blueprint for the comprehensive revision of workers' rights when Labour comes to office. It's a significant step forward in a detailed programme of work for the next Labour government. It means establishing a Ministry of Labour, sectoral employment commissions. There's proposals to ensure rights at work are not just universal, but they're enforceable. In addition to that, it secures freedom of association and, yes, secures the right to strike in this country for the first time written in law. Now, that's a programme that we've endorsed and that we will implement. Take that as a commitment from Jeremy Corbyn, myself and our administration. But we'll go further, to be frank. Contained within this as well, of course, is the restoration of basic trade union rights, collective bargaining. But I want that, and Jeremy reiterated that in a speech yesterday, but I want to go alongside that a reform of corporate governance. What does that mean? It doesn't mean what Theresa May says on the steps of number 10, a few trade unions on a few boards, possibly. What it means is the engagement of workers in the management, the decision-making around investment, around reward policies, that includes wages, etc., and the long-term decision-making on the future of those companies. So we will give trade unionists, as of right, the ability to influence the agenda and determine the agenda of the companies that they work for. This is industrial democracy on a scale that we've not seen in this country, and we're committed to it. That means, as those workers go on those boards, not that they get incorporated, but they set the agenda. And one key element of that agenda will be health and safety, to make sure people no longer go to work at the risk of losing their lives or at the risk of serious injury or disease. It means for me, personally, it means for me employment conditions become a priority and health and safety prioritised again. I'm a Scouser like Rush enough, but I lost my accent because we moved south as a kid. My dad was on the docks, and I can remember him coming home one day, minus one finger, on the docks. And that was common experience. And actually they used to joke about it in the family that he just wasn't quick enough. But that was a common experience, time and time again on the docks, if you didn't get your hook out fast enough from a bale or something like that. And when you've experienced that in the family, you know, for my generation, and certainly for my father's generation, it was almost the norm. Almost the norm that you expected at some time in your life to be injured. Well, what's happened in the current climate, we've almost accepted that industrial illness has become the norm, or exposure to various, either asbestos or various chemicals or other risks. We're going to end that climate, and then we're going to end also the climate of impunity where managers and directors and others can walk away without bearing any responsibility for the injuries to the workers that they employ. Just to make sure you're clear as well on some of the points that we've mentioned in some of the conversations this weekend and elsewhere, we will ensure that there's an inquiry into Orgreave. We will make sure that all the paperwork, all the evidence will be provided to the Shrewsbury pickets to make sure that they get and we will make sure, and I tell you, it will give me personal pleasure to open up the inquiry into blacklisting, so we expose what went on and make sure we have the legislation so that no one ever again in this country will be blacklisted. Full stop. As we go into government, can I also say, yes, I've mentioned about the compromise agreements and they will go, and the gagging clauses, etc. Can I say also that Jeremy, as you know, appointed a Minister for Mental Health into our shadow cabinet for the first time in the history of this country. And that was because we took mental health issues seriously, but also because we also took seriously the issues of stress at work and what's happened to our We have immediate challenges in the next couple of months, and my immediate challenge is to get Jeremy Corbyn re-elected, to be frank. But our immediate challenges also will be to support the campaigns, to support safety reps, to make sure that we end victimisation and we support those individuals who are being victimised at the moment, and we'll be alongside, and I repeat time and time again, whether it's in Parliament or on the picket line, Jeremy Corbyn and myself will be with you on that. In terms of the opportunities that we've got, we have a new opportunity now working together to create a new agenda, not just to oppose the Tories, but also a new agenda of health and safety when we go back into government. And the commitment I'm bringing today from Jeremy Corbyn is that we'll work with you to develop that agenda, and we'll work with you to campaign, but more importantly, we will drive it through when we go into government. This is a new type of politics. Gone is the politics where we look to individual leaders. Gone is the politics where we, to be frank, this is just in government, it's just a rotation of the elites. We are now a mass movement. We're calling it people-powered politics, and that's what it is. So working together in this coming period, together, we will ensure that we create a safe environment for workers. The person who said, you know, you can get depressed when you hear of all the problems, I just say this, you know, I keep quoting Gramsci and all the people in all the organisations. I've been meeting with the CBI and the Federation of Small Businesses and Chamber of Commerce and even the TUC, and I'm quoting Gramsci at them. I just love it. But it's raising levels of awareness, and at least I give them a reading list. Gramsci's best quote, I think, is pessimism of the intellect. Yeah, know how bad it is, but optimism of the will. And that's what we need, optimism of the will at the moment.
Thank you very much. I think that was more than we could hope for. Thank you very much, John, and thank you so much for being here and bringing those commitments. And I think you know where we are. You know where we are. We're all behind you. Can we have just a few questions just to finish off? Can we just wait for the microphone and just take about 3 questions, and then what else we got? Philip at the front and 2 people at the back. And then down there. Okay, so Philip, 2 at the back. And then Dan, and then possibly this young man down the front. Have you got your mother's permission to be here?
I'm Philip Lewis from London Hazards Trust, but I'm also a member of Camden Unison and a member of the Labour Party. What I want to know is, because everyone will be asking this question, and quite right too, all the excellent proposals you put together, which I totally agree with, could you explain to people, because they do need explaining to, how that's going to be resourced? I know how you're going to do it. You're going to make the bankers pay for a change, and a few other people, but I think that needs to be explained.
Okay, thank you, Philip. That's a good question. So, resourcing of the policies. 2 people at the back, and then Dan.
Yeah, big Longstaff POA, one POA member to another. Will you support us in the repeal of Section 127 of the Criminal Justice Act, which stops us from taking any form of industrial action?
Okay.
And 2, will you join us in condemning Michael Spur's £15,000 a year pay rise? For those of you who don't know, Michael Spur's the Chief Executive of NOMS, who's overseen the destruction of both the prison service and the probation service.
Yeah. Thank you. Good question.
I'm Paul from Unison up in County Durham. You mentioned about the stress at work. I was at a workshop yesterday where we were discussing the new sickness management policies that have been rolled out by most councils and a lot of employers. Would you agree with me that I think the reason why a lot of people are off on the sick and long-term sick is because austerity is crippling everyone. Everyone who works in the county council seems to be panicking for the job. Yeah. I've applied for my job 3 times in the last 6 years. Other people have been worse off than me. Yeah. I think the reason why people are so sick and so often and for so long is because we're all stressed a bit about our jobs and the financial situation. Yeah. And it needs to be addressed.
Thank you. We have a question from Dan.
Dan Shears from GMB. It's a very quick question, John. We've heard an awful lot in the last 2 days about the incredible mental health toll that this is taking on people. Luciana Berger was obviously mental health shadow minister until she resigned. We understand very clearly that you guys are stretched at the moment because of this leadership contest. Can you give us 2 pledges? 1, that we'll have a shadow mental health minister when Jeremy wins, and 2, can you tell us who'll be covering mental health in the meantime, so we can give them the support they need?
Thank you. Can I just see how many other people there are who want to speak? We've got one here. Okay. Any more? Okay, there are a few more. So, no, Doug, shall we just take those and then we'll get them going? I just want to see if there was enough. If there was one, I'd take it. So, can you take Philip's question, the POA and the stress, two stress ones? Do you want to, can you use the microphone?
Okay, in terms of, let's just go quickly through the resourcing issue, because the whole basis of our programme is it will be funded as a result of the reforms that will be introduced for taxation. First of all, we'll tackle tax evasion and tax avoidance. As you know, at the moment, the estimate is about 120 billion is lost to us through tax evasion and tax avoidance. We won't be able to collect all of that, but we'll have a better stab at it than this government, and maybe collect up to 40 or 50 billion of that, I think. The second issue then is we'll halt all the tax cuts that are going ahead at the moment, or reverse them, in terms of capital gains tax and corporation tax. Most of that is going out to the wealthiest 10% of our society, well 5% in terms of capital gains tax. But in terms of the corporation taxes at the moment, the government is looking to cut corporation tax down to 15%. What that means is that the idea is that that will mean corporations will invest that money in the economy. That's not happening. They're actually sitting on earned income of between 500 and 700 billion. So again, the corporation tax cuts are not working in the interest overall. So there are a couple of ways in which actually we can get resources into the economy that will invest and grow the economy. And we're looking at investment now of a £500 billion programme. Where has that come from? That's been independently assessed as what's needed to modernise our basic infrastructure. If we can do that through a national investment bank, we believe then that we can start growing the economy again, and in that way we increase the tax base overall and we can afford the public services that we want. So it's a combination of tackling tax evasion, tax avoidance, reversing the tax cuts to the wealthy and the corporations, growing the economy, and then investing in public services. This is not rocket science, but in addition to that, what is bizarre, and I quote Gramsci again, we've hegemonised the debate, because virtually everyone now is on the same page in terms of the IMF, the OECD, TUC, and in addition to that, we've now got the Chamber and the Federation of Small Businesses and the CBI urging the government now to actually start investing in the economy to grow it. Why is that so easy at the moment? Because interest is so low, now's the time actually you can actually borrow the money extremely cheaply and to do it. But even the Bank of England now is taking up quantitative easing again, so we'll have all these attempts now to start growing the economy. I'm almost going to sue some of these people for copyright, for nicking our ideas, but there you are. So it's perfectly doable, and to be frank, our Economic Advisory Committee has been arguing the case for the last 10 months that we've set up. In terms of the POA, I'll declare an interest. I'm an honorary life member of the POA now. I'm really proud of that. Labour was committed to repealing the strike ban of the POA before we went into government in '97, and then Blair reversed it and refused to deliver. We will deliver on that. It is outrageous, and it goes against all the ILO conventions, international laws, etc. And again, we'll reverse it. In terms of the £50,000 increase for the boss, I've been having lots of NAPO members turn up as well at these meetings. There were some down there in Exeter the night before last, and also in Plymouth. People need to realise what's happened in terms of the preparation service in particular and NOMS overall. The privatisation that went through on the basis of legislation unfortunately introduced by New Labour has meant that the Tories have now brought privatisation on a massive scale to probation, cutting staff, causing absolute chaos in the administration of prisoners, both those inside and those being released. And to be frank, I think it's extremely dangerous. I think it's extremely dangerous, and I think there could be some horrendous implications coming out of it. And what they'll try and do is blame the staff, not the system. And I also have to say, I think, my own view, I just think it's immoral that you can make profits out of locking people up or probation. Paul's issue in terms of the stress that some people in the public sector and elsewhere are under at the moment. All the figures are demonstrating that the high levels of stress, people dropping out of professions as well. If you look at what's happening in teaching, 50,000 now have gone, we've got 6,000 vacancies for trainees as well, in terms of trained to be teachers. It's happening right way across local government as well. And it is the pressure that people are coming under, both in terms of the workloads that they have, but the constant pressure of outsourcing and privatisation. So literally people are going into the civic centres and town halls not knowing whether their desk is still there or whether they've still got a job. And what's interesting about it is not only is it appalling in terms of the stress levels it places upon people, but also it's completely counterproductive, because what you're losing almost in, if you like, productivity levels means is that it becomes more, it just isn't cost effective. And it's interesting, isn't it, the figures on the amounts that's been spent on agency staff now across the public sector is undermining any arguments that they have that this increase of intensity of work by people is making any savings. That's why the critical thing for us now, in both the private and the public sectors, the importance of securing getting back up to collective bargaining to the scale it was before. Collective bargaining in our country used to be at least cover 2/3 of workforce up until about 97. It's now 20%. If we can restore trade union rights, we can get collective bargaining on that scale again. It means, therefore, trade unions will be in an environment in which they can protect their workers, not just in terms of wages, but also in terms of conditions, and also counteract this pressure they're under with regard to stress levels. In terms of the Dan's question about mental health, at the moment we've got Debbie Abrams and Diane Abbott covering the whole issue there. We'll reappoint as soon as we can. But if Jeremy's IJW, if Jeremy wins, and we'll form the shadow cabinet again, we'll seek to appoint a person in shadow cabinet for mental health again. But we're also, I've got some flack from this in the last week or so, we've also got a group of volunteers in the trade union movement and the Labour Party at the moment, led by Janine Boone from RMT. She's brought together a group of people looking at neurodiversity and whether or not we need a minister for neurodiversity. So it takes it out of being a disability as such, but actually looks at all policy right the way across the government. I think that's incredibly creative, and that's another way forward that we'll be looking at as well.
Thank you very much, John. And Sarah, back there. Sarah Friday up there. Sorry, we're doing some jiggery-pokery with the photographers. That's what it's like being famous. Okay, so can we have Alan first?
Thank you. Alan McShane from Blackburn Trade Union Education. Thanks very much, John, for coming on. That was very inspiring, what you said to us there. Adult education has been ravaged by the Tories since they've come in. There's been massive cuts to adult education. But one of the areas me and John work in trade union education, that's also suffering cuts as well. The Tories don't want trained union and safety reps. They don't want people with the knowledge. They don't want people with the skills to take the fight into the workplace. And from September, the funding for trade union education is being cut by half.